Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Four Fusion. No, it's ranking the albums today. Looks like Four Fusion Friday, right? Because we got, of course, Eric Porter and George Lamie in the house with me, and we are talking Fusion today here on ranking the albums, right, gentlemen?
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's right. We got Simon Phillips' great band Protocol, and some of you may be saying to yourself, "I don't think I know Protocol at all." Well, this is the band that Simon Phillips has had in his mind since the late 80s, but really has made it more of a prominent, and I don't know if I want to call this full time, but at least a more active band in recent years. The Protocol band has had a revolving cast of characters. Day one was basically Simon doing everything, but since then he's got Ernest Tibbs and kind of like a rotating cast of folks playing. We'll talk a bit about the lineups as we go through this. We've got 5 albums in total. The most recent one was out, what was that, 2022?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Protocol 5. They're very creatively named Protocol or Protocol 2, Protocol 3, 4, and 5, right? So nothing too spectacular there. It's almost like the Chicago situation all over again. But I will say, for those of you that like classic fusion, but with obviously a modern twist, this is some pretty serious stuff here. Maybe not every one of these albums is an absolute classic, but most of them are pretty damn close to them. And as far as like modern fusion outfits go, it doesn't get much better than this. So I think you're gonna like what you hear today, and hopefully it will provoke you to go ahead and explore this catalog if you haven't already. So we got 5. Let's you want to do 2 at a time, and then we'll do our number 1 last?
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, Eric, kick us off with your number 4 and your number 5.
All right. So I was trying to think about when I first heard about Simon Phillips, and I know you guys are big Priest fans, and he played, what was it, Sin After Sin, I think. So he's been around forever, but for some reason I remember him being of the MTV generation. I remember him on Pete Townsend's like Give Blood, and I
Right.
think they were like live videos from that White City album. And I just remember like just watching him and thinking like, I think he did some little cool double bass drum thing in that tune, and it was live. I think was the MTV video was like a live video. So that was really cool. And I know he's played with, countless. He was actually a member of Toto, but he's
He was
played
with
on
Toto for a long time, actually.
right countless albums. But you know, I just he's just a great drummer. I love him. I know he does a lot of stuff with my buddy Derek, Mr. Serenian. So they're buds, and they play together a lot. But George introduced me, I believe the first thing I ever heard was Protocol 4. And when I started getting into this stuff and asking George about it, check that out. And obviously having the Simon Phillips name, right away, I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And I had to go out and get all 5 as soon as I heard that one. So, but I'm going to start actually with the debut, and I think this is 1989. So it's just the Protocol album, and I think in reading about this, Simon was actually doing, and it's kind of confusing. So you guys might know this record better than I do, because I thought in reading about it, it was kind of like a 5 or a 6 track thing that he did, and I believe he played everything on those first 5 or 6 tracks. Kind of did it in his own studio and was doing kind of a promo thing. He was probably trying to get a deal somewhere. And I think, in doing that, you have to be impressed. You think of him as a drummer, but I know he did a lot of the keyboard stuff. I even think he did the guitar stuff on at least 5 of those tracks were just all of him. So that's very impressive to know that, not only is he a musician, he's a writer, but he's a multi-instrumentalist. And the only thing I would say about this is I think when I was listening to this one, going back to it, is you hear, he's obviously developing as a writer, and you probably hear the ideas that as he put the band together, and it's quite a jump from this, the first one, 1989. I think Protocol 2 is like 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So, you get this big, like, you get the ideas, I think. And then the way I just picture Simon is like, he put this band together, but he knew guys that he wanted to be able to flesh out these ideas. So I just think it's, you know, it's nothing in terms of there's such a time difference, I think, in these that, you know, you just get to hear him develop. And I think when you listen to that first one and then you hear the band on Protocol 2, you know, you can say, okay, I know what he was trying to do. And now he's got the other guys who really can do it for him. But it's still very cool to hear somebody go into a studio, have that kind of talent, and be able to put all that stuff together, knowing what he wants. It's just kind of interesting. I know careers change and things happen, but having that vision of Protocol and such a time span between this first one and Protocol 2. But that's what I'm going with for my number 5. And then if you want to do 2, I'm going to jump to Protocol 3, which I think was 2015. And this one, Pete, I know you mentioned lineup changes. So this one has Ernest Tibbs, who I actually love on bass, and he's been a mainstay since Protocol 2. So he was with that one. This is actually this lineup and the lineup on Protocol 2 are the same. So you have Andy Timmons on guitar and Steve Weingart on keyboards. So this is a 4-piece at this point. And with Protocol 3, I think obviously 2 and 3 being the same band, and I think they're only 2 years apart in release, very similar. I just felt like Protocol 3 was a little more laid back maybe than Protocol 2, and I liked it. But what I will say is when we start talking about our favorite tunes, is this one, the last 3, I thought really like this album closes very strong. So I think those were like Circle 7. I love Ernest Tibbs in that one. You get, being a 4-piece, you get that great keyboard and guitar interplay going back and forth. Great electric piano from Weingart. I really like his playing. I like this band. I think once you get to 2 and you go right through it, they're just fabulous. You know, he really was able to put people in who serve the music, and I just love it. So like I said, I think when I go through this one, I like these records, and I like Andy Timmons. He's more of a bluesy, you know, and we'll talk about the other players. He's kind of a bluesy rock guy, but I think he fit this music well, and he does do some stuff where you get more of that phrasing, maybe that's more similar to the Fusion guys, but I think he kind of gives it kind of a rock foundation. But Circle 7, you can't, but you can. That's almost like a really loose feel, great jamming in that one. Again, Weingart on that Rhodes, the electric piano, whatever he's doing, and Timmons was really fiery in spots, and Undercover was just a great closer. So so my first 2 are the first Protocol and then Protocol 3.
Cool. George.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo Eric, and my number 5 is gonna be the debut. Yeah, 6-song EP. He plays all the instruments. Even the guitar is programmed. He plays a guitar patch on the keys. And you know, it's the best that they could do in 1989. So if you're not really listening, it probably passes as guitar, but if you really listen, it's not so
Doesn't
guitar.
sound very good. Yeah.
For me, the best song is V8. That kind of reminds me of the stuff he used to do with Beck. But this is one of those weird albums where that way it lays out, I kind of like the odd number tracks. I feel like the even number tracks, you get 2 that are not so developed, and then the closer is a partial drum solo. Those I don't like as much. My addition to this though is he did a reissue in 2016, and he added demo versions of the songs that ended up on Force Majeure Live.
Yep.
And if I took that version, I would have it up at number 3, because those songs I think are really strong. We talked about that album before. I think that's a strong album. But again, those songs are demos with just him again. But still, those 4 or 5 tracks, they would bring it up for me to number 3. But as it sits, I would put it here at number 5. This version, the original version. Number 4, I'm going to go with Protocol 2. Like Eric said, this is when the band proper starts. Worth noting, after the original one, the 90s, he has solo albums that are in this same vein. Symbiosis, Another Lifetime. There's a live one in there that I don't remember the name of. And a lot of these same guys are on there. And some of the guys from Force Majeure, like Ray Russell's on some of it. Andy Timmons is on some of those. So it's kind of a mixture. Those are worth chasing down too, but they're out of print. But yeah, so I'm gonna put Protocol 2 here. Wildfire is my favorite track by far, the lead track. It's a fantastic song. I also like Upside In, Downside Up, and Enigma, but this doesn't really move the needle for me. There's a lot of, decent songs, backgroundy kind of. They don't grab me and just make me stand up and take notice. Steve Weingart is a guy I really enjoy. He came from Dave Weckl band. Loved his playing there. I think he ended up in this band. All these guys, Timmons too, they're all West Coast guys, and Simon's a West Coast guy. So I think he just recruited guys that he used to play at the Baked Potato with, that kind of a thing. But Weingart is a great pick. Timmons is not my favorite for the reasons Eric mentioned. He's not a legit fusion guy, more of a bluesy guy. Came out of I think Danger.
Danger, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, his background is odd. Obviously, he's educated, or Simon wouldn't even tab him, but I just feel like he doesn't excite with his solos. So I got Protocol 2 at number 4.
All right. Number 5 is the first album. Basically for all the reasons you guys already stated. I mean, you can tell the kind of the framework for this band is kind of here, but the production is very dated. There are some good tracks on here. Streetwise, I really like a lot. What's it missing? Some ripping guitar, to quote Eric, right? Red Rocks is pretty good. Again, you got that kind of weird guitar sounds on there, which kind of stick out like a sore thumb. But man, the drums are awesome on this. Slow Funk, to me, sounds like something that Jan Hammer would do. That's pretty good. V8 is absolutely killer. That to me is really where the Protocol sound really happens on this album. Going forward, you got the drum solo on here, whatever. I think what's interesting, like listening to this, and going through this exercise and re-listening to all these albums, it's amazing how spoiled we've gotten from all the albums that come after this. And then when you go revisit this, you're kind of like, okay, that's all right. It's what it is. It's okay. For the time, I guess, pretty interesting. But compared to these other albums, I mean, it doesn't compare. That's the whole thing. My number 4, I'm going to go with Protocol 2, which I don't have a hard copy of yet. And that's the second album, obviously. Yeah, I think all of these albums going forward, I really enjoy quite a bit. I love the lineup. You guys are right. Weingart is really good. I love his electric piano sounds on these 2 albums. Just absolutely love them. The drum fills are great. I kind of agree with George on Andy, but I still think he's a fabulous player. I don't think he quite moves me in this band like the other 2 guys we're going to talk about, but I still think he's damn good. And if he was on every one of these albums, I wouldn't complain. It's just that once you get a load of some of the other guitar players that come in who I think fit a little better, it makes him stand out a little bit. But I think he's a really good player. He's very, very well respected in the industry. Soothsayer, got some great soloing from him. Like I said, Wildfire is just absolutely amazing. Upside In, Downside Up, it's a complete ripper. Love that. Andy kills it on that one. I don't really care much for Octopia. It's all right. Enigma's pretty good. That's kind of funky and groovy. Everyone's solos on it. I think it's a really good album. It's just, I think out of all the ones that aren't the debut, I think to me it's just the weakest by a little bit, but it's still really, really good. I enjoyed a lot. So that's my number 5 and 4.
And so I'll go with my number 3. Maybe it's my short attention span, but I'm going with Protocol 2, where you guys went with 3. And it might be because 3 kind of hit me at the end of the record. And this one, like you guys said, Wildfire, absolute killer. Ernest Tibbs is just so good. And I love watching him, and we'll talk about this when we get to the top 2, but I would encourage anyone who has any interest in this. There's YouTube video, and I think, is it Little Big Beat Studios or something like that? I can never remember the name of it, but I think it's got one of the Protocol lineups. It might have the 4 lineup with a different keyboard player, but regardless, I mean, that's to see them in that format and they're just playing live to a tiny audience. To me, that locked it for me. So, but I think on this one, we all talked about Wildfire to kick it off. It is the best track on the record as far as I'm concerned. Soothsayer, and I think this is where, like we were talking about Timmons, I think he gets this really bluesy tone, which I actually think works with Weingart. I think between those electric keys and I think we all said that where we're going to talk about the 2 other guitar players as the band lineup changes. But I don't know, he works. Regardless of what we end up liking better or worse, he's a terrific player. And it's just a different flavor. And it might be something that would bring people to this from maybe that side of things where maybe you like a more rocky or a bluesy guitar player. Even Moments of Fortune, that one kind of pulls back a little bit. It's nice and laid back, but again, there's some nice guitar work from Timmons on that. And I really liked, I think, First Orbit. He just has this really nice, clean tone, that Strat tone. And I know he doesn't use Strats. And I can't remember what guitars he uses, but I know he's a Mesa Boogie guy. I've watched a lot of his videos and his tutorials, but I liked his tone on this record. And he always will have, even with the clean stuff, there's just like a little bit of hair, so it's got a little punch to it. And then when the band or something kicks in, and then he kind of throws that overdrive in. But I like that. And I think you guys mentioned Upside and Down, or Upside, Downside Up, whatever the name of that one was. That's another one where between the guitars and the keyboard playing is just fantastic. And Timmons, I think, tears that one up too. So I'm going with Protocol 2 at my number 3. And then Protocol 5, I'm going at number 2. This was a big change, and I know none of us have talked about 4 yet, but this lineup has a saxophone player. I think it's Jacob Cessny. Odemaro Ruiz is now on keys, and Alex Sill is the guitar player. And Sill, to me, has that kind of Holdsworth vibe to his playing. Him and Cessny are amazing and together. And as a guitar player, at one point, I might look at this and say, there's a lot of unison stuff going on. Not that it's sax dominated, but you've got another instrument that's up front in the music. So when I was listening to these, I'm like, maybe 2 and 3, I would put above these because they just have the guitar stuff. But I don't know. There's something about between the writing on this and the playing, and I just think 5 is fantastic. And this is the most recent. I think this was 2022. There's Jagannath kicks it off. That one, just a great guitar sax line. And you'll hear this throughout, so I probably don't need to say it on every song, but when you have the trade-offs and you get the keyboards, now you've got sax in the mix plus the guitar, there's just incredible playing with these players. Isosceles is another good one. And I think, as I got into the 2, and we'll talk about my top one, obviously, on the next go round, but Alex Sill, I think I heard those first 2 songs. I'm like, this dude's going to fit. He's just terrific. And he's not to give anything away, but he replaced Greg Howe, who was on Protocol 4. He definitely brings a different flavor in his playing, but he's absolutely phenomenal. I think really good writing on this, very solid. The melodies stick. And I think that's a credit to obviously Simon, but you wonder how much input a lot of these guys have. I went back, I was thinking about one of the discussions we had on Prog Seat on the last episode where we talked about the 4 solo albums from Genesis. And I think probably the conclusion was they all work better as a whole than as, solo, even though there's some great solo work. And it is, you think this is Simon's baby, but you think about the contributions that all these guys bring. They may not be writers, but they're putting a lot of their own stuff into this. So I think each band offers a little something different over the course of these 4 albums with 3 different lineups, and then obviously the first one was just Simon. But totally impressed with Alex Sill. Great player, and I really enjoyed the sax on this. So maybe there was a little trepidation, but first 2-3 tracks took that right aside. So Protocol 5 is my number 2.
Did either one of you think that when we heard that they were adding a sax to this lineup, that it was going to go down like Electric Band Avenue, and be pleasantly surprised that there are similarities, but it's really its own thing?
I wasn't sure what it was
Yeah.
going to be. I definitely had trepidation. I mean, just because it's so different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like you say, well, they don't really need a sax player. Then you hear the album, you're like, oh, well, maybe they did. Because it worked.
Yeah, and it worked great. And that's the thing that I thought was funny. I'm thinking I would think I would go back to the guitar stuff, but I
And
was
it's still plenty of
really
guitar on it,
impressed.
which is cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So Marlon, we're talking to you. If you're watching, don't discount Protocol 5 just because it has sax on it. There's a lot of guitar on there as well. Trust us. All right, George, over to you.
All right. My number 3 is Protocol 3, 2015. Yeah, we all hear things differently, obviously, because to me, this one's ever so slightly more peppy than 2, which is Eric's reason for preferring 2. Maybe, I don't know. I go for an Armada, Catalyst, and I think he mentioned both Circle 7 and Undercover. So that's half the album basically that really grabs me. Then the other half's just kind of pleasant tunes, It's more of the same for part 2. Those of any of 2 albums in the catalog are of a pair, it's 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Between the solid lineup and I think the writing and the general sound is very static on those 2 albums. So if you like one of those, you probably need to get both of those because those are the 2 that really resemble each other. And number 2, I'll go with Eric and say Protocol 5. I had trepidation about the new guitar player, and B, adding another instrument. Like, if you had asked me before, hey, you want to add sax to this band? I would probably been like, nah, that's good, Nothing against sax, but they had a sound on 4 and the early ones. And I just, I didn't want to rock the boat, but I trust Simon, and he got Chesney. Chesney's a great player. I kind of expected that. Alex Sill, I knew from when Mr. Holdsworth died. Alex Sill played one of these tribute gigs. He sat in with the band that Steve Hunt put together. Steve Hunt knows Holdsworth as well as anybody, so I knew what kind of player Alex Sill was anyway. But you just don't know what he's going to add on the creative end. But he's great on here. I mean, Eric said it best. Those 2 openers, Jagannath and Isosceles, wow, those are great. Those are as good as anything they've done. And then you got the closers, 11.5-minute epic, The Long Road Home. So putting their foot in those waters. Basically the whole album I like. Maybe Dark Star, a little softy, not so much, but the rest of it, really good. I mean, I got a really good boot from that tour. I think I sent it to Pete. Just fire. The whole tour, there's a little videos on YouTube too. I mean, it just sounds like all the dates were great. And because they got this great material to play. So that's my number 2, Protocol 5.
All right, George and I are in sync today. So Protocol 3 is my number 3. Basically, I don't know what else I can add here. I think it's just, to me, it's just maybe a little bit tighter on the songwriting from the second album, but I totally agree with, I think 2 and 3 are of a pair. They're very, very similar. Some great tracks on here. I like Outlaw a lot. Imaginary Ways is great. Great drumming from Simon on that one. I probably like Circle 7 and You Can't, But You Can probably the most. I think Timmons just destroys on both of those tracks. It's really good. I enjoy it quite a bit. But yeah, that's definitely my number 3. My number 2 is going to be number 5. So we are right in sync. Everything you guys said, great new lineup. It totally works. It's just a really classy album, and I think the songwriting's really good too. I love Sill's guitar playing. I mean, Eric said it perfectly. He's got this Holdsworth thing in him, and it just really works here. And he's replacing a guy in this band who played some really spectacular stuff, as we're going to get to in a minute. And I think he just, once you hear this, you're kind of like, okay, cool. I'm fine with the lineup change now. It works. It just totally does. And the sax fits right in. Jagannath is terrific. Yeah, just so many good songs on here. Undivided, what is it called? I can never say it.
Undignity.
Undignity, yeah. That reminds me of Jeff Beck's There and Back Again period. It's got this kind of like playfulness about it, very melodic, but just really, really cool. Yeah, I like everything on here, but I like one a little bit more. So that's my number 2. Eric, why don't you talk about number 4?
I was
Because
gonna say Protocol 4. So this was my introduction. It is obviously my favorite. I absolutely love Greg Howe. And it's not taking anything away from the other players. We've talked about Alex Sill and Andy Timmons, both great, and I like that they both brought their own thing. So, that could put your direction into one or the other based on what you like. But to me, this is a 5-star record. I absolutely love it. Greg Howe fits perfectly. And I mentioned that Little Big Beat Studios. This does have, I think those videos have Tibbs, Greg Howe, obviously Simon Phillips, but for some reason I think the keyboard player on 5, I don't think it's Dennis Ham on those videos. I think it's Otomaro Ruiz, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah.
But go watch that, because that kicks that off. And actually Dennis Ham, who is the keyboard player on this, he's terrific too, and he uses a lot of the electric. I mean, maybe that's the Simon's thing too. I don't know. But he uses the electric keys a lot, Rhodes, whatever. Again, you get, and I think this is where, we talked about the songwriting. I think the songwriting is fantastic. I love the unison playing, and as much as we talked about how much we love Jacob Cesny and the sax, I do like having that guitar centric to that. And so I think like Nimbus, that one is an earworm. Pentacle has this really great stabbing road stuff going on, which I absolutely love. Great. Just, I think for instrumental music, obviously, again, people have a difficult time sometimes maybe retaining it, because a lot of people will hear words and in other band's music, and then that's kind of what connects them to the song. So it might take a little more time with this stuff. But I don't know. Solitaire, How is absolutely on fire for me. Gets a little funky. Just everything. And I think Phantom Voyage might be the softie for George on this one. But I just think it's gorgeous. And again, How is all over that. That's the closer on this one. But all things considered, I mean, I could talk about all of them. It's just an absolutely great record. Greg Howe is probably, if not my favorite, one of my absolute favorite players. So it was hard to not put this anywhere else. But I think even Greg Howe aside, the writing, 5 and 4 are extremely consistent, song wise, melody wise. I think for me, just Greg Howe kind of puts it from here to here. Well, very, very small, but I got to go with 4.
I remember Greg Howe when he first burst on the scene years ago, and he was like this, one of those new shredders that came on the scene, right? And for years, I just didn't listen to anything by him at all. And then I remember the first time I heard this album, it was the first time I had listened to anything he was on in a long time, and I was just blown away. I'm like, wow, this guy can do this sort of stuff. I'm like, this is pretty amazing. But apparently on a lot of his solo stuff, he dipped his feet into this sort of thing. But I just wasn't listening for whatever reason. So yeah, it's amazing stuff on here, right?
Without a doubt.
I can't remember if I turned you on to this album because Howe was on it, or that's how you started liking Howe. I can't. It's too long.
I think it's number 2. I think for some reason you threw this one at me.
You liked Howe afterwards.
Good Lord. Yeah, he just blew me away. So
Yeah, it's weird sometimes you can't remember that stuff. I got the background with how, like Pete said, he turned shrapnel on their heads. So all the shrapnel stuff until 1988 was either metal or neoclassical. And then here comes a guy comes out that sounds kind of like Eddie Van Halen with an advanced legato technique for his soloing. It's like we called it blues wank around here. Oh, he's one of those blues wankers. But it was so influential. All these guys started doing that instead. All the guys that probably hated neoclassical or couldn't play all that harmonic minor, they were like, "Oh, I can do this," you know. And they don't do it like Greg Howe does it. I mean, but yeah, there was a flood. Like Hotson was like the right out of the gate right after that, and just kind of snowballed. But he did that first Sakurai record in 2001, and my appetite was, can this guy play fusion? You know, and that's fusion, but it's kind of its own thing. And like those Sakurai albums have a sound, and it's a lot heavier than what I knew Simon Phillips was going to do. So when I heard he was going to be in a Protocol album, I had some trepidation. Like, how's that going to turn out? You know, wow, really good. It was actually a bit of a slow grower with me, but the two tracks that sucked me in were Pentangle, which is a funk in five. I love funk. I love stuff in five. That just sold me. And then Passage to Agra.
Yeah.
Is some of the soaring melodies in that it's just so good. It's so memorable. Those are the first two tunes that really sucked me in, and then following in with the rest of the album.
And
You know,
how
he just
cool is it on Passage to Aggro where he's doing those little whammy bar things that give it that kind of like Southeast Asian kind of feel to it, and it's so awesome. I can't.
yeah,
I've never heard anybody do it like that.
that melody, da-na-na-na-na-na, you can hear him hitting the bar.
Yep. And it's kind of a slow build into the song too, right? When it kind of
Yeah,
starts, builds that
that-
tension.
that's something we got to mention. To me, I hear a leap with Simon's songwriting between 3 and 4. I
Yeah.
just think it's more interesting. It's more developed. I just find it. I think it's more everything. It's just more. I mean, he's gotten a lot more accomplished, and maybe it has something to do with working with Sharinian too. He Everybody gets a little bit off of other people that they work with. Maybe they, he took some aspects of what Derek does. I don't know, but uh, I just feel like that album, the whole experience with that, I would like to ask him next time you get him on, Pete. We have to ask him why'd you move away from Howe? Did Howe have work booked, or did you just decide to move away? I don't know. I'd be really curious because I feel like those two really meshed. And you know, the keyboard thing, I like Dennis Ham. I like Otmar Ruiz, so that's kind of a wash for me. I'm fine with both of those guys. I'm sure that was a work thing. Dennis Ham works a lot on the West Coast. He was actually in Cab briefly. Like, I think every West Coast keyboard player has been in Cab at some point, but yeah, it's just a great album. Um, one of the best in the last 10 years. So if you haven't heard it, get it.
I wrote in my notes, this is one of the great fusion albums of the last decade. I mean, it is. And if you haven't heard it, you need to. Yeah, I don't know how much more I can add. You guys have said all the great stuff here. I do want to mention I really like Dennis's synth sounds on this album. I think he's got a lot of good, whereas the other guy is a little bit more electric piano focused. He's using a lot of synths on this album, which I think works really well. It's a little different. I like that this album has a good amount of variety. As George mentioned, there's some really good funky groovy stuff on this album, which really works. There's some of the burners on here. I mean, yeah, Celtic Run is great. All things considered, I love those wah wah licks, man, on the guitar. Just I'm a sucker for wah wah, and that just really works for me on there. Azarez is a great closer. I really like Phantom Voyage a lot because I think that the guitar solos are just absolutely emotional and gorgeous and heart tugging, and he's blazing. It's technical, but man, it's just there's so much feel to it. Just absolutely love it. Yeah, this is pretty much a perfect album. So he's
Okay,
in.
great. So when is 6 coming out?
Yeah, good question. I haven't heard anything out of Simon's camp recently.
soon as Mr. Sherinian lets him go for a little bit, I
Yeah,
guess.
there gives him a break.
Well, Simon now doesn't have to worry about the touring commitments and the grind of Toto. And I think once he stepped away from Toto is when Protocol really started up fresh again. So I think
Yeah.
he basically could do whatever
And
he
they
wanted.
just did, if I'm not mistaken, were they in Japan, George, recently? Like a couple shows?
Protocol?
Yeah,
I
unless,
didn't know that.
okay, I thought, I could be wrong, and I know,
I mean, they played a
they
bunch of
must
shows
do-
here in the States. Was that last year, right? Yeah.
yeah, I think they did a bunch of shows as well here, but for some reason, I thought they had done uh Japan. Maybe it's not as recent as I'm thinking, but I thought they'd been there because there's some videos out on YouTube of some shows, so I have to go back and check that out.
Well, they definitely need to get back in the studio, that's for sure.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's been 2 years already, right? And they've been pumping these out. I mean, fairly consistently since whatever was it 2013 or so.
So do you find it like, so if I'm thinking guitar player wise, Timmons to Howe obviously is a big difference stylistically, and even Sill stylistically to Howe is fairly different. Any thoughts on those players and why they were picked? Do you know why Howe or Timmons was brought in?
I assume that was location. They're West Coasters also.
Okay.
But they're also good players too. I mean, but I wonder if he'd get Sill because he liked working with Howe. They both have a very legato based soloing style versus Timmons was not that really.
Mhm.
Maybe it's something to do with the soloing is a little more high tech, maybe something along those lines. But no problems with Sill. He's great.
No,
He's really good. He's really good. Yeah, we'll see. If we get a new record from them in the near future, and if they keep the lineup intact, or are we going to see additional players go in and out through this band? I mean, I could think of other people who probably would also be an interesting fit here, but I would prefer. Hopefully, they keep the lineup consistent.
I was going to say it's not that scary the thought of losing a guy because Simon knows like everybody that kicks ass.
right.
You got to put somebody fit in somewhere. You know he's going to do a good job.
Watch, we'll see. It'll be a year from now, and all of a sudden they'll announce a new album featuring Frank Gambale on lead guitar. Right? We'll be like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. Although Frank's living over in, is he still living in Spain or whatever now? So
I think he's in Europe. Yeah.
yeah, so that probably won't be the case. But there's lots of guys on the West Coast that I'm sure.
Oh
if
yeah.
Mr. Sill couldn't make it, that they could step right in. So we'll see. So there you have it, everybody. Ranking the albums of Simon Phillips Protocol, 5 records. Go check them out. If you haven't, if you know these, if you're a Fusion person, you probably do. Rank them as you like them in the comments below. And if you haven't listened to any of these, hopefully you have some good places to start where you can go out and investigate and check them out. And you never know, might see more of some of these, or hop in on a 4 Fusion Friday episode in the not too distant future. You never know, because George has got a million albums up his sleeve. So we'll see how that goes. And by the way, if you didn't see 4 Fusion Friday on Friday or yesterday, after this episode, go watch it because it's a really fun one. And any chance that we can talk more about the Mahavishnu Orchestra and some of these great fusion albums is always a good thing. So go check it out and visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also down below, down there, down underneath Eric somewhere, we've got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, our merch page, and our Cameo page. Thanks, as always, for all your support there. And we'll see you soon here on SOT. We've got coming up Hudson Valley Squares on Monday. We're going to be talking about our favorite albums from 1974. And then 1 week from today, here on the Ranking the Albums show, Mr. Grant Arthur's coming back. We are going to be ranking the albums of a band, another obscure band, JoJo Gunn, featuring a couple of folks from Spirit. 5 albums, very cool stuff, good rock band. Stay tuned for JoJo Gunn next Sunday, and we'll see you then. For Eric Porter, I'm Pete Pardo. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody, and see you tomorrow night on the Hudson Valley Squares. Take care. Bye-bye.